Hello, I'm Esther Githu-Yuart. It's Friday, January 21st. This is Africa 54.
More than a dozen people are dead and scores are injured in a Ghana mining truck crash. COVID and poverty widen the education gap in Uganda. And the U.S. AFRICOM commander says mercenaries in Mali are among the continent's growing threats.
At least 17 people are dead in West Africa and many others were injured when a truck carrying explosives to a gold mine in western Ghana collided with a motorcycle. The accident on Thursday triggered a blast that flattened a rural community, according to the Ghanaian government. Police say the explosion injured 179 people and at least 45 are in critical condition. Video shows widespread damage and authorities say 500 buildings were destroyed, displacing over 500 people. The explosion happened at Bogoso Apiase, a village 300 kilometers west of Accra. Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo declared on Twitter, "This is a truly tragic incident, and on behalf of the government, I extend my deepest condolences to all the crew members. On behalf of the government, I extend my deepest condolences to the families of the deceased." In our COVID-19 update, the World Bank has approved a loan of $750 million to South Africa, aiming to protect the poor and support economic recovery from the pandemic. Leading disease experts say the Omicron variant is not likely to help countries achieve so-called herd immunity against COVID-19. The World Health Organization is reporting a significant drop in the number of new cases of COVID-19 in Africa for the first time since the Omicron variant began widely circulating in Africa 2 months ago. Meanwhile, schools in Uganda are open after a 2-year shutdown caused by the pandemic. Halima Thumani has more from Kampala.
15-year-old Rania Chomhanji is one of 6 children in her family who will not be returning to school. When schools closed in March 2020 for more than 15 million students, Rania had just reached high school with a dream to be a medical doctor.
I feel bad because I see my friends, my neighbors, them calling us, telling us that they are going back to school, asking us that when are you going back to school, and I don't know what to say.
Uganda reopened schools January 10th after 2 years of closure due to the coronavirus pandemic. The government launched a 1-month back-to-school campaign to ensure all children return. The Ministry of Education has issued guidelines for schools not to raise tuition for returning students. State Minister for Primary Education Joyce Moroku Kaduchu says for those who are not able to afford tuition, they should devise other means to ensure their children resume studies.
Some parents may not have money, but they may have food in rural schools. They may have cassava, they may have maize, they may have beans. That is something also the school can say, okay, you don't have the money, but are you able to bring some food stuff which we can translate into money? Don't get annoyed.
Oliver Naiga, a former teacher and Rania's mother, comforts her 6 children with a Bible session. She was laid off, and with no school to hire her, she couldn't afford to take her 6 children back to school, and the minister's suggestion didn't work for her.
We tried Rania to take her back where she was, pleading that we shall pay slowly. They were not ready to accept. And I see my girl is growing. It is not easy to look out, to stay with a girl who is growing at home for 2 years.
UNICEF Uganda says that during the school closure, on average, Uganda's 15 million students collectively lost 2.9 billion hours of learning time per month. Many of those children began working during the closure, and Munir Salfeddin, the UNICEF country representative, says their families will not easily give up that income.
And to facilitate their return to school, we definitely need to look into a number of support systems, support programs, which I also understand, there is a trade-off. These support systems, like social protection systems, where families of which are experiencing poverty should be supported. Unfortunately,
Munir notes that these programs require a lot of public financing, which is a challenge for a country like Uganda. Halima Othmani for VOA News, Kampala, Uganda.
A new study is revealing that over 1 million people are dying every year from bacterial infections that are resistant to antibiotics. That makes multi-resistant bacteria far deadlier than HIV, AIDS or malaria. Henry Ridgwell has the details.
Typhoid fever is a growing problem in many developing countries, including in Pakistan, fueled by a strain of the bacterium that is resistant to antibiotics. It can cause a high fever, diarrhea, vomiting and death. A recent study in Nairobi revealed a dramatic increase in drug-resistant strains. It is just one example of a disease that is making a comeback. The largest multinational study of its kind shows that across the world, an estimated 1.27 million people died directly from infections caused by bacteria resistant to multiple antibiotics.
It is estimated that if we don't find alternatives by 2050, millions of lives will be lost and there will be $100 trillion lost output.
The study, published in The Lancet and led by the University of Washington, analysed data from 204 countries. Poorer nations are worst hit by antibiotic resistance, especially sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. Most deaths were caused by respiratory or blood infections. Scientists say the misuse of antibiotics over decades has encouraged microorganisms to evolve into superbugs.
For example, people have viral infections and they have been prescribed antibiotics for very many years now. And this, over the years, has made the problem very severe. So the bacteria have become really resistant to these antibiotics.
The World Health Organization has warned that none of the 43 antibiotics in development or recently approved were enough to combat antimicrobial resistance. So what can be done? Sagona, along with scientists around the world, are working on new treatments called phages.
These are viruses that can specifically target bacteria, and they can be used in combination with antibiotics or on their own to clear bacterial infections of multi-resistant strains.
Despite the promising new treatments, scientists say it's vital that existing antibiotics are not overused to help slow down the development of the ever deadlier superbugs. Henry Ridgwell for VOA News, London.
Namibia's High Court has ruled against two gay couples seeking legal recognition for their marriages, even though the judge in the case says it was time the Southern African country's constitution reflected social reality. Jeffrey Young has more.
Namibia's High Court has ruled against two gay couples fighting for recognition of their marriages, even though the judge in the case said she agreed with their position. Daniel Degashu and Johan Pagaiter married in South Africa, and Annette and Anita Siller-Leels in Germany. Both couples now live in Namibia, where the legal system does not recognize same-sex marriages. Sexual conduct among non-heterosexual couples is also criminalized, though the law is rarely enforced. Outside the court, Christian activists carried banners.
Marriage is between a man and a woman.
But inside, Judge Haneli Prinsloo was saying it's high time that Namibia's constitution reflected social reality. The couples argued that the word spouse in Namibian immigration law should include same-sex couples, or the clause be declared non-constitutional.
Hallelujah.
The judge said she agreed, but was bound by a more than 20-year-old Supreme Court ruling that said Namibia does not recognize same-sex relationships. Annette Seeler-Leal says the decision was disappointing, but there was room for change.
But I think we didn't lose, so we will go on. It's perfectly good.
She said that they would now discuss an appeal and were grateful for the support that they had received from many in the Namibian community. Jeffrey Young, Washington.
22 prisoners are now free in Chad. It is the first of some 250 members of armed groups being pardoned in an effort to promote peace building. Clara Frank reports.
At the Klassoum prison in Chad, these inmates are waiting to be freed. There's 22 of them, the first tranche of some 250 members of armed groups receiving a pardon. That's part of efforts at peace building in the North Central African country following the battlefield death of President Idriss Déby last year. Samedi Tourde Tanel was one of those immediately released on Tuesday.
We are very happy to be reunited with our families. I urge authorities to continue with these efforts to extend amnesty to the other brothers who are still in armed groups to allow them to return to legality.
Rebel groups have been invited to join peace-building talks scheduled for mid-February. However, the main group, the Front for Change and Concord in Chad, or FACT, said it would only take part if the interim government made gestures of peace. Tuesday's short ceremony near the capital N'Djamena was led by Justice Minister Ahmad Mahamat Al-Habo.
This pardon agreement is to be welcomed because it is a pledge to restore trust between sons and daughters of Chad and to bring about the much-needed social peace.
Last year, FACT crossed Chad's northern border from Libya and advanced south. Déby was killed while visiting troops fighting that insurgency. Chad's Transitional Military Council is led by Mahamat Idriss Déby, the former president's son. He has said the national talks are a necessary precursor to presidential and legislative elections. Clara Frank, Washington.
Would like to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, the head of the U.S. Africa Command sounds an alarm on the increasing security threats across Africa. We'll be back.
Empowerment and humanity towards a better world.
Economic and social progress of every society.
Facts and information from key players rather than spectators in politics, business, science and technology.
City, rural, educated, all underprivileged. We care and we listen to what matters to you.
Your voices are our voices.
The head of the U.S. Africa Command says security threats are growing across the continent. In his first on-camera interview since taking command 2 years ago, General Stephen Townsend spoke with VOA Pentagon correspondent Carla Bob about his increasing concerns, including the spread of violent extremist groups, the role of Russian mercenaries, military inroads by China, and threats from Iran.
The U.S. military has now confirmed reports that Russian mercenaries known as the Wagner Group are in Mali. General Stephen Townsend, the commander of U.S. Africa Command, told VOA Thursday that Mali's junta brought in hundreds of foreign fighters to protect their regime.
Wagner is in Mali. They are there, we think, in numbering several hundred now. They're deploying there, supported by the Russian military. Russian Air Force airplanes are delivering them. The world can see this happening. So it's a great concern to us. And the reason it concerns me and it concerns the neighbors there is we have watched Wagner, this mercenary outfit, work on the African continent. We've watched them in the Central African Republic, Sudan, Libya. They don't follow anybody's rules but their own. They will exploit the country. They will break laws. They will do gross violations of human rights. They will kill innocents and civilians. And then when the Malian people get tired of them, they won't leave.
Townsend, who took over U.S. Africa Command in 2019, also told VOA the most active global competitor in Africa is not Russia, but China. Beijing, he says, is following billions of dollars of economic investments on the continent with creeping, steady, and strategic military investments. In 2017, China's military opened up a base in Djibouti just a few kilometers away from Camp Lemonnier, the United States' only military base in Africa. The general said Beijing now looks to Africa's western coast, intent on building a military airbase or naval facility in Equatorial Guinea.
They're putting chips down in all these countries on the Atlantic coast. They know that they won't get a yes in many cases from many of those countries. But by asking and trying to get a base in all these countries, one or two of them may say yes. And we think that the place that they've got traction right now is Equatorial Guinea. We're not asking them to choose between China and us. What we're asking them to do is consider their other international partners and their concerns, because a Chinese military base in Equatorial Guinea is of great concern to the U.S. and all of their other partners.
In addition to Chinese military expansion, Townsend said he's monitoring a less obvious threat to U.S. interest on the continent, the one from Iran.
We are starting to see them express increasing interest in Africa and starting to make some inroads there. I think their inroads are going to be malign in nature. And so we're just keeping an eye on it. It's very nascent, but it's happening now, and we're watching it.
Can you give us any examples? Can you get into a couple of examples of that?
I'll just say that they're intelligence-related, and they're the arm of the Iranian security apparatus that engages in malign activity in the Middle East is the same arm that's now engaged on the African continent.
A U.S. official confirmed to VOA that after a U.S. drone strike killed Iran's elite Quds Force leader Qasem Soleimani, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps plotted assassination attempts on American diplomats in Africa and is still looking for revenge targets there. Iran has dismissed the accusations as baseless. Due to concerns over increased threats, officials say in the past year, the U.S. military has brought in new and improved defense systems and anti-drone weapons to Camp Lemonnier. The Pentagon has just completed a global posture review of U.S. forces and military resources around the world, a review that Townsend says, quote, ratified AFRICOM's current posture. The command did, however, lose some funding for military exercises with African partners. And for the last year, Townsend says he has shuttled troops in and out of Somalia. Donald Trump ordered most of the 800 U.S. troops out of the war-torn country in 2020 in one of his last foreign policy moves as American president.
They are in bases in the region, and we commute to work. And so who's in Somalia every day is less than 100.
How's that affecting the mission?
We are working hard to get our tasks done. I think that there's more effective and efficient ways to do that. We provided those recommendations to the Secretary of Defense, and we're waiting for decisions there.
But as Townsend awaits decisions from the Pentagon, political infighting continues in Mogadishu, where al-Qaeda affiliate al-Shabaab is adding to its ranks.
The threat of al-Shabaab is growing, and if increased pressure is not applied to al-Shabaab, I'm concerned that there's going to be a significant al-Shabaab attack. We've seen just suicide bombs going off in Mogadishu over the last 2 weeks. So I think they're expanding and they're a growing threat.
The January 12th attack on the Somali capital killed at least 8 people. Carla Babb, VOA News.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken reiterated after meeting Friday with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Geneva that the United States and its allies are ready to respond to a Russian invasion of neighboring Ukraine. The West is demanding that Russia pull its troops and weapons away from the Ukrainian border, while Moscow insists that NATO reject Ukraine's membership bid. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden has sought to clear up any misunderstanding surrounding remarks made on Wednesday. VOA senior diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain reports.
With Ukraine bracing for a potential Russian invasion, U.S. President Joe Biden said Thursday his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, is fully aware of the consequences.
I've been absolutely clear with President Putin. He has no misunderstanding. If any assembled Russian units move across the Ukrainian border, that is an invasion. But it will be met with severe and coordinated economic response that I've discussed in detail with our allies, as well as laid out very clearly for President Putin.
Biden raised eyebrows the day before during a White House press conference when he said a minor incursion by Russia into Ukraine could trigger a debate among NATO allies on how to respond. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky took to Twitter to respond to Biden's original remark, saying there are no small nations and no minor incursions. German Marshall Fund's Michael Kimmage told VOA he does not consider Biden's impromptu remark to be damaging because the U.S. leader's overall message to Putin has been very clear.
But I think what Biden was trying to say, President Biden was trying to say, is that there's going to be a graduated response calibrated to the severity of a Russian move, which, I think boils down to common sense.
In Berlin, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Germany's foreign minister and outlined the high stakes surrounding a possible Russian invasion during a speech Thursday. The top U.S. diplomat said a Russian invasion would violate long-held principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity, triggering a major land war in Europe that would likely leave tens of thousands of people dead.
To allow Russia to violate those principles with impunity would drag us all back to a much more dangerous and unstable time, when this continent and this city were divided in two, separated by no man's lands, patrolled by soldiers, with the threat of all-out war hanging over everyone's heads. It would also send a message to others around the world that these principles are expendable, and that, too, would have catastrophic results.
Blinken started his diplomatic tour in Kyiv, meeting with Ukraine's president on Wednesday, and travels from Berlin to Geneva to meet with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on Friday. While the West has rejected Russia's demand for a guarantee that Ukraine will never join NATO, analysts say there are plenty of security issues to be discussed.
So there are some things that are not on the table, but there are some things like missile deployments in Europe, like military exercises, again, on both sides, missile deployments in NATO, missile deployments in Russia, military exercises by NATO, military exercises by Russia. Those kind of things can be discussed. And if President Putin wants to climb down, look for a non-violent way out, this is on the table.
With Russia releasing video of its forces conducting drills near the Ukraine border, experts say Moscow would likely come to regret an invasion, which could turn into a long, costly war. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
President Biden says there is some progress being made after 8 rounds of talks between Iran and 6 major world powers over Iran's nuclear ambitions. But Russia has been holding its own discussions with Iran's leadership. VOA White House correspondent Anita Paul has the latest.
Major world powers have spent months holding delicate talks with Iran in hopes of resurrecting the 2015 agreement to curb Tehran's nuclear weapons program. The agreement was ruptured in 2018 when former President Donald Trump withdrew the United States from the deal. The 6 nations who entered the pact, known as the P5+1, have allowed Washington and Tehran to speak indirectly since President Joe Biden resolved to rejoin the agreement last year. In 2019, Iran began to incrementally violate the restrictions, alarming the West. The 8th round of talks ended this month without significant progress, but Biden said he's optimistic.
It's not time to give up. There is some progress being made. The P5+1 is on the same page, but it remains to be seen.
But are the members in agreement? As Biden spoke, Russia, another member of the group, met separately with Iranian officials. On Wednesday, Russian President Vladimir Putin hosted Iran's president, who appeared to say the 6 parties may not be entirely in lockstep.
We are in a unique situation that has created considerable cooperation between the two countries against the West's unilateralism and American power.
Those who have been watching Iran closely say there may be reason for hope.
I think the basis for President Biden's assessment is that analytically, a deal is evident. And that deal would entail Iran coming back into compliance with its obligations under the 2015 nuclear agreement in return for sanctions relief and an extension of the sunset provisions that would have ended the constraints on Iran's uranium enrichment program. So analytically, you can see the structure of a deal. But the question is whether there's political space in Tehran to seal the deal.
VOA asked White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki to shed light on why Biden is optimistic.
We're in the diplomatic negotiations, and we've been very clear about where we stand on what we would agree to. But again, I don't have anything to read out for you beyond the status of where they are now.
Could this escalate? Litvak says there may be a third path.
If diplomacy fails and there are major constraints on the use of force, the third alternative is America's traditional default strategy toward adversarial states, which is containment and deterrence. And that strategy worked against Stalin's Soviet Union, Mao's China, and the Kim family's North Korea. The proponents of the military option, should diplomacy fail, are arguing that Iran's regime is uniquely dangerous and irrational. And that assessment runs up against the national intelligence estimate by the intelligence community, which argued that Iran operates according to a cost-benefit analysis.
So could a breakthrough happen now after 8 rounds? Maybe. On Thursday, Iran's president told Russian lawmakers the regime is not seeking nuclear weapons and is serious in reaching an agreement, if the other parties are serious in real and effective removal of the sanctions. Anita Powell, VOA News, at the White House.
And that wraps up our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in America's capital, Washington, D.C., have a great weekend.